I thought I was doing the right thing when I brought my son-in-law into the family business. After all, he was married to my daughter, he had an MBA, and he promised to help take the company to the next level. What I didn't know was that he'd been planning to steal everything from me from the very beginning. But karma has a funny way of working, because the quiet janitor who'd been mopping our floors for 20 years, he wasn't just any janitor. And what happened at that board meeting will shock you. Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and let me know where you're listening from in the comments. I never thought the man I welcomed into my family would systematically destroy everything I'd spent 25 years building, right under my own roof. Hi everyone, my name is Diane Reynolds, and I'm 58 years old. 25 years ago, I started Reynolds Digital Agency from my kitchen table with nothing but a used laptop, a dream, and a determination to prove that a single mom could build something meaningful. My daughter Chloe was just 7 then, and I remember her coloring at that same table while I made cold calls to potential clients, trying to keep my voice steady even when my hands were shaking from stress. Those early years were brutal. I'd work 16-hour days, taking any project I could get, designing flyers for local restaurants, building basic websites for small businesses, managing social media accounts for anyone willing to pay me $50 a week. But slowly, painfully, beautifully, my little company grew. I hired my first employee when Chloe was 12. By the time she graduated high school, we had 15 people on staff and a real office downtown. Chloe was my world, my motivation, my everything. Every late night, every missed dinner, every sacrifice was for her future. I wanted her to never worry about money the way I had. I wanted her to see that women could build empires, that hard work and persistence could overcome anything. She used to come to the office after school, doing homework in the break room while I finished client calls. The whole team knew her, loved her. She was our little princess. So when Chloe met Marcus Blackwood 3 years ago, I was thrilled. My beautiful, smart daughter had found someone who seemed to adore her. Marcus was charming, well-educated, and ambitious. He had an MBA from Northwestern and worked for a prestigious consulting firm. When he looked at me with those bright eyes and said, "Mrs. Reynolds, I can see where Chloe gets her intelligence and drive," I felt like I was gaining the son I'd never had. The wedding was everything Chloe had dreamed of. I spared no expense: designer dress, luxury venue, flowers that cost more than my first year's revenue. Seeing her so happy made every penny worth it. Marcus seemed genuinely grateful, telling everyone at the reception how lucky he was to be joining such an extraordinary family with such a successful business legacy. That should have been my first red flag, but I was so happy to see Chloe settled and loved that I ignored the little voice in my head. The changes started small. Marcus would casually mention at Sunday dinners how old-fashioned some of my business practices were. "Diane," he'd say with that practiced smile, "you built something incredible, but imagine what it could become with some modern strategies. Digital marketing has evolved so much since you started." He'd say it so kindly, so respectfully, that I found myself nodding along. Chloe started echoing his sentiments. "Mom, Marcus has some really good ideas. Maybe you should listen to him." My daughter, who used to defend my every decision, was now questioning my expertise in the field I'd mastered for decades. When Marcus suggested joining the company to help take it to the next level, I hesitated for about 5 minutes before agreeing. How could I say no to family? How could I deny my son-in-law the chance to contribute to our legacy? Plus, Chloe seemed so excited about the idea of working alongside her husband. I created a position for him, Director of Strategic Development. I gave him a generous salary, a corner office, and access to all our client information. I thought I was being welcoming. I thought I was investing in our family's future. That's when the real manipulation began. Marcus started questioning my decisions in staff meetings. Not aggressively, he was too smart for that. Instead, he'd say things like, "That's an interesting approach, Diane. Have you considered this alternative?" Or, "I love your passion for this project, but what if we looked at the data differently?" Always respectful, always framed as helpful suggestions. But I noticed the staff started looking to him for approval before implementing my directives. I noticed clients began asking to speak with that sharp young man instead of requesting me directly. I noticed Chloe pulling away from our weekly mother-daughter lunches, claiming she was too busy with work that somehow always involved Marcus. The financial suggestions came next. Marcus convinced me that our company structure was inefficient and vulnerable. He brought in his lawyer friend who explained how we could modernize our corporate framework to protect our assets and optimize our tax situation. The documents were thick, full of legal jargon that made my eyes glaze over. When I expressed uncertainty, Marcus would sigh and say, "Diane, I understand this is overwhelming, but trust me, I'm looking out for our family's future." Chloe would chime in, "Mom, Marcus knows about this stuff. He went to business school. Just let him help you." So I signed. God help me, I signed every document they put in front of me because I trusted them. Because they were family. Because I thought love meant the same thing to them that it meant to me. Our company's quiet janitor, Walt Jenkins, had been with us for almost 20 years. He was always there early, always left late, never caused any trouble. During this whole period, I noticed him watching these interactions more carefully than usual. Sometimes I'd catch him pausing his work when Marcus was speaking in meetings, or lingering nearby when Marcus was on important phone calls. But Walt had always been observant, always protective of our little work family, so I didn't think much of it. It wasn't until months later, when I tried to make a major business decision and was told I needed board approval, that I realized what had happened. Somehow, through all those legal documents and corporate restructuring, I had become a minority shareholder in my own company. Marcus now controlled 49%, Chloe had been given 15%, and various other small percentages had been distributed to key stakeholders. When I confronted them, Marcus just smiled that same charming smile and said, "Diane, this is what's best for the company. You'll still be involved, of course, but now we can make decisions more efficiently." Chloe wouldn't even look me in the eye. "Mom, maybe it's time to trust other people's judgment for once." I was still making excuses for them, still believing that somehow this was all a misunderstanding that we could work through as a family. After all, they loved me, right? They wouldn't really hurt me, right? I had no idea how wrong I was and how much worse things were about to get. The next 6 months were a masterclass in psychological warfare, and I was too blind to see it coming. Marcus stopped pretending to be respectful. In client meetings, he'd interrupt me mid-sentence to clarify what I meant, making me look confused and outdated. "What Diane is trying to say is," became his favorite phrase. Our biggest client, Henderson Corp., started requesting that Marcus handle their account exclusively. When I asked why, they said he understood their vision better and seemed more in tune with current market trends. I felt like I was losing my mind. This was my company, my expertise, my relationships that I'd built over decades. But suddenly I was being treated like the office grandmother who didn't understand how things worked anymore. The staff meetings became public humiliation sessions. Marcus would arrive with printed reports showing where my decisions had allegedly cost us money or missed opportunities. He'd stand at the head of the conference table, my conference table, and present his findings with the confidence of someone who'd built this company from scratch. "Now, I'm not saying Diane's approach is wrong," he'd say, making sure everyone could hear the condescension dripping from his voice, "but perhaps we need to evolve our thinking to stay competitive." My own employees started avoiding eye contact with me. Jennifer from accounting, who used to chat with me about her kids every morning, suddenly became too busy for small talk. Tom from creative, who'd been with me for 8 years, started running his ideas by Marcus before bringing them to me. Even my assistant, Maria, began scheduling my meetings through Marcus's calendar to ensure proper coordination. But the worst part was watching my daughter. Chloe had completely transformed into someone I didn't recognize. She'd sit in these meetings, watching her husband systematically tear apart my reputation, and say nothing. When I'd try to speak with her privately, she'd brush me off with comments like, "Mom, you're being too sensitive," or "Marcus is just trying to help the company grow." The breaking point came during a particularly brutal staff meeting when Marcus announced his 5-year modernization plan, a complete overhaul of everything I'd built. He wanted to rebrand the company, relocate to a more expensive downtown space, and bring in his former colleagues as senior consultants at 6-figure salaries. I finally snapped. "Marcus, this is still my company. You can't just walk in here and change everything without discussing it with me first." The room went dead silent. Marcus looked at me with what I can only describe as barely concealed contempt. "Diane," he said slowly, "I think you're forgetting that business decisions are made by the board now. And the board has already approved this direction." "What board?" I demanded. "When did we vote on this?" "The board meeting you missed last Tuesday because you were feeling under the weather," Chloe said coldly from across the table. "We sent you the minutes." I never received any minutes. I was never told about any board meeting. But as I looked around that conference room at the faces of people I'd hired, trained, and trusted, I realized that none of them were going to defend me. They were all too afraid of the new power structure. That's when Marcus dropped the bomb that shattered my world completely. Actually, Diane, since we're all here, there's something else we need to discuss. He opened his leather portfolio and pulled out a thick document. The board has been reviewing your performance over the past year, and we're concerned about some inconsistencies in your leadership approach. My heart started pounding. What are you talking about? We've documented several instances where your decisions have negatively impacted client relationships and company morale. There's the Henderson account situation, the failed Morrison campaign, your resistance to necessary technological upgrades. He was reading from a prepared list, checking off my supposed failures like items on a grocery list. I looked desperately at Chloe. My daughter, my baby, the reason I'd built this entire empire. Chloe, you can't be serious about this. She finally looked at me, but her eyes were cold. Mom, maybe it's really time for you to step back and let others take the lead. You've worked so hard for so long. Don't you want to enjoy your life a little? The betrayal hit me like a physical blow. This wasn't about business efficiency or company growth. This was about removing me entirely. Marcus continued with theatrical sympathy. We prepared a generous severance package. You can retire comfortably knowing you've left the company in capable hands. Or, he paused dramatically, we can implement a performance improvement plan and see if you can adapt to our new standards. And if I refuse both options, I asked, though I already knew the answer, then we'll have to consider termination for cause. The room was spinning. 25 years of my life, reduced to a hostile takeover by my own family. But then I noticed something that gave me a tiny spark of hope. Walt, our janitor, had been quietly cleaning the whiteboard in the corner during this entire meeting. He wasn't supposed to be there, but no one ever paid attention to Walt. As Marcus delivered his final ultimatum, Walt caught my eye. For just a moment, I saw something in his expression that I'd never noticed before. It wasn't the humble resignation of a man who cleaned offices for a living. It was the sharp, calculating look of someone who understood exactly what was happening and didn't like it one bit. But I was too devastated to process what that meant. I stood up on shaking legs, looked around the room one last time at the company I'd poured my soul into, and walked out. Marcus had security escort me to my office to pack my personal belongings. 25 years of building relationships, developing strategies, and growing a business, and I was being treated like a thief who might steal the staplers on my way out. As I sat in my car in the parking lot, clutching a cardboard box of family photos and my favorite coffee mug, I saw Walt walking toward me with more purpose in his step than I'd ever seen before. For the first time in months, I wasn't entirely alone. Walt knocked gently on my car window, and when I rolled it down, he didn't say the comforting words I expected. Instead, he looked me straight in the eye and said, "Diane, we need to talk. There's something about your company that Marcus doesn't know." I was too emotionally drained to be curious, but something in Walt's voice made me get out of the car. We sat on a bench in the small park across from my office building, the same building where I'd just been escorted out like a criminal. 20 years ago, when you needed that big investment to expand, do you remember where the money came from? Walt asked quietly. I nodded slowly. An anonymous investor. My lawyer said someone believed in the company's potential and wanted to help, but preferred to remain silent. Walt pulled out a worn manila folder from his maintenance cart. Diane, I was that investor. The words didn't make sense at first. Walt cleaned our offices, emptied our trash cans, mopped our floors. How could he have had the kind of money I'd needed back then? I was injured on a construction site in 2003, he explained. Back injury that ended my career. The settlement was substantial, more money than I'd ever seen. My lawyer suggested investments, but I didn't trust Wall Street. Then I heard about this brilliant woman who was building something special, something real. He opened the folder and showed me documents that made my world shift completely. Legal papers, stock certificates, investment agreements, all bearing Walt Jenkins' signature as the majority shareholder of Reynolds Digital Agency. You own 51% of my company, I whispered. Our company, he corrected. I never wanted control, I wanted to help you succeed. The agreement was structured so you'd maintain full operational authority while I remained a silent partner. I took the janitor job because I wanted to stay close, to make sure my investment was protected and that you were treated right. Tears started flowing again, but this time they weren't tears of defeat. Walt, all these months of Marcus's takeover, why didn't you say something? His weathered face hardened. Because I needed to see exactly what kind of man your son-in-law really was. I needed to document everything before I acted, and now I have enough evidence to destroy him legally and professionally. The next morning, Marcus called an emergency board meeting. He wanted to officially announce the company's new direction and his promotion to CEO. He'd even prepared a press release about the exciting leadership transition at Reynolds Digital Agency. I arrived at the conference room to find Marcus already holding court, explaining his vision to the same staff members who'd watched me get humiliated just 24 hours earlier. Chloe sat beside him, looking smug and satisfied. Then Walt walked in, but he wasn't wearing his janitor's uniform. He wore a sharp navy suit, carried a leather briefcase, and commanded the room's attention in a way I'd never seen before. "Ladies and gentlemen," Walt announced, "I'm Walter Jenkins, majority shareholder and chairman of the board of Reynolds Digital Agency. This meeting is now called to order." The color drained from Marcus's face. "I'm sorry, who are you?" "The janitor doesn't belong in board meetings." Walt opened his briefcase and distributed copies of the original investment documents to everyone present. "I'm the man who owns 51% of this company, Mr. Blackwood. And I'm here to address some serious irregularities in recent management decisions." Marcus started stammering about legal challenges and demanding to see Walt's credentials, but Walt simply raised his hand for silence. "Mr. Blackwood, effective immediately, you are terminated from Reynolds Digital Agency for corporate fraud, misrepresentation of authority, and attempted theft of company assets. Security will escort you from the premises within the hour." "You can't do this," Marcus screamed. "I have contracts. I have board approval." "You have fraudulent documents based on an illegal manipulation of corporate structure," Walt replied calmly. "Mrs. Reynolds was coerced into signing papers that violated the original shareholder agreement. Every action you've taken in the past year has been without proper legal authority." I watched my son-in-law's arrogance crumble into panic as Walt continued methodically destroying every lie Marcus had built his takeover on. The staff sat in stunned silence as Walt reinstated me as CEO with full operational control. But the most satisfying moment came when Walt turned to Chloe. "Ms. Blackwood, you have a choice to make. You can distance yourself from your husband's fraudulent activities and remain with the company in a junior position, or you can leave with him. But you'll never again have decision-making authority over your mother's life's work." Chloe looked between Marcus and me, finally seeing her husband for what he really was. When she reached for my hand, I saw my little girl again, confused, scared, and realizing she'd been manipulated by someone she trusted. "Mom, I'm so sorry," she whispered. "I didn't know. I didn't understand what he was doing." The aftermath was swift and brutal for Marcus. Walt's documentation led to a criminal investigation for corporate fraud. Marcus's MBA friends wouldn't return his calls once word spread about his methods. His reputation in the business community was destroyed overnight. As for me, I learned that sometimes the people who seem invisible are actually your strongest allies. Walt refused my offer of a corporate title, preferring to remain our facilities manager and senior advisor. But now I knew why he'd always paid such close attention to our business operations. My relationship with Chloe is slowly healing. She's working hard to earn back my trust and prove that she's learned from this experience. Some days are harder than others, but love finds a way when people are truly willing to change. The most beautiful irony? Marcus thought he was so clever, manipulating a naive old woman out of her own company. He never bothered to notice the quiet man who'd been watching, listening, and protecting us all along. Sometimes the best revenge isn't loud or dramatic. Sometimes it's just the truth, spoken by the right person at exactly the right moment. Thank you for listening. Don't forget to subscribe, like, and feel free to share your story or opinions in the comments.